I think the Royal Institution building is a bit like some kind of kaleidoscope. Everyone comes in through the same door and they see the same things and they go, oh, I know what this is. And then they say something completely different. Building a theatre before you've even started building your laboratory, it says something about the ethos of the organisation. I knew that I really loved science. I didn't want to be a scientist. And I didn't know what the rest of that sentence was, but I was very sure about that sentence from quite early on. There are lots of ways of generating these experiences of awe and wonder, and I think that is what brings us together as human beings who participate in science, and that's what positions science as a shared endeavour.
Hello there, I'm Sarah McCluskey, and this is Research Adjacent. Each episode, I talk to amazing research-adjacent professionals about what they do and why it makes a difference. Keep listening to find out why we think the research-adjacent space is where the real magic happens. Hello there, I'm your host Sarah McCluskey and welcome to Research Adjacent. Now, if you're listening to this episode around its release date, you are probably gearing up for Christmas, and perhaps one of your Christmas highlights is watching the Royal Institution Christmas Lectures, which have been broadcast on BBC television since 1966. Well, today you're going to meet Katherine Mathieson, who is the current director of the Royal Institution and one of the people behind that iconic lecture series. I've known Katherine since we worked together about 15 years ago. She worked for the British Science Association and I ran unnecessarily large science education events for schools on their behalf. As you'll hear, Katherine first got into science communication in the late 1990s, working for Science Line, a charity where people could phone in their science questions, something that many of you listening probably can't even imagine being a thing. We talk about the 226-year history of the Royal Institution and why the building means different things to different people. It's not just home of the Christmas lectures, it's also an active research facility, an education space, museum and membership organisation. It's also a place for sharing the awe and wonder of science, something that Katherine is very passionate about, and we talk about why finding a bit more awe and wonder might help to address current challenges around misinformation and anti-intellectualism. Now, I did try, but Katherine was careful not to share any spoilers of the upcoming Christmas lectures, but I can share that this year's presenter is space scientist Maggie Adairn-Pocock, and that you can watch a live stream of the lectures being filmed on the 11th, 13th and 16th of December in over 25 locations across the UK. I'll put a link in the show notes and you can check that to get the details and see if it's coming to a place near you. But for now, listen on to hear Katherine's story. Welcome along to the podcast, Katherine. It is lovely to have you here and also to speak to you again. It's well over 10 years, I think, since I've last spoken to you, so lots to catch up on. But for our audience who haven't perhaps met you before, could you tell us a bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure, Sarah, it's great to be here and to talk to you again. Really looking forward to this conversation. I'm Katherine Mathieson. My current role is director at the Royal Institution. And my background, my journey is very much through science communication and science education. That's what I'm passionate about.
Yeah, and that's very much where we know each other from in the past. So tell us a bit more about your current role, though. The Royal Institution, a very iconic organisation. Tell us what does it mean to be director there?
It's a joy to be director, to be part of the team at the Royal Institution. We do such a wide range of science communication and related activities that I love being immersed in the day-to-day. You know, we do something different every day. There's always different people in the building or getting in touch about projects and content. And it feels really nice, really rewarding for me to be so close to the audience that we're working with. I can literally drop into activities that are going on in the building or in schools around the UK or other partners. And I've worked in a range of organisations that work in different ways to support this kind of activity, but it's really nice for it to feel very tangible. Like I can just go and talk to people, to young people or audience members or whoever, about what they liked about something or what they didn't like. And so I'm really enjoying that, being part of that kind of team.
Yeah. So the Royal Institution building now it's almost a bit like a science centre. Would that be a fair thing to say, but a very historical one?
I think the Royal Institution building is a bit like, I don't know, some kind of kaleidoscope, because people come into the same building, they come through the same, everyone comes in through the same door, and they come into the same building and they see the same things and they go, oh, I know what this is. And then they say something completely different. Right? So some people come in and they go, oh, it's a centre for research, because we have researchers on the premises.
Right,
okay. Wet laboratories. Up on the third floor, we've got an electron microscope under the stairs. We've got a team of researchers who are part of UCL doing research on biomagnetic materials. So they come in and they're like, oh, this is a research institution. Great. We've got researchers from the London Institute for Mathematical Sciences. They're on the second floor. They've got a lot of blackboards and chalk and very high-powered computers. And they're doing maths and theoretical physics. And so for them, it's a place to do original research on maths and theoretical physics. And then if you come in at about 10 o'clock in the morning, you'll be by the door with a load of really excitable young people from a school somewhere, probably in London, but sometimes further afield. And they'd come in to do a workshop in the Urenco Young Scientist Centre. So they're really excited to be having a day trip and to be in the Royal Institution. And so for them, it's an educational place, and quite an unusual looking one, maybe, because it's quite a posh building, quite an elegant building. And then if you come in at 7 o'clock in the evening that day, there'll be, 300, 400 people there who've come to listen to a talk by a cutting edge researcher on some area of science. And we cover the full range. So for those people, they'll say, oh, it's a cultural venue. It's a place I go to in the evening, like the cinema or the theatre or whatever, because we do have a gorgeous theatre. And then we host lots of external events as well. So people come in for meetings, conferences, receptions, launch events. For our members, it can feel like a place where it's part of their identity and part of their life. Some of our members, they're coming for the first time, especially our family members. But some of our members have been coming for 50 years or 60 years, and they've seen it change over that time. And it feels very much a place where they feel at home. So for them, it's part of their family, maybe part of their family history. And then there's loads more on top of that. If you come on a Saturday afternoon, then we might be doing a show in the theatre where we've turned all the smoke alarms off and we're blowing things up like extravagantly in the theatre, or in any part of the building, really. We love a bit of that. We're doing some kind of our favourite demonstrations kind of show. So a huge range of activities going on in the building every single day of the week, which is really exciting. And so it is a science centre to some of our visitors.
Yeah,
but it's lots of other things as well.
Yeah, it really defies definition, doesn't it? And it is fantastic. I didn't realise you still had research going on the premises, which is fantastic, real original research, because that goes back, that really fits in with the history of the building, doesn't it? Yeah. So I was having a bit of a look before we came on the call, and I knew it was old, and I knew it was associated with all of these big names in science history, but I didn't realise it went back quite as far as it did. So maybe you can tell us a bit about the history of the building.
So the building was purchased in 1799 to be a home for science, and it would have been a kind of a Georgian townhouse for a wealthy gentleman at that time, and it came up for sale, and the founders of the Royal Institution bought it and set about turning it into this kind of place for science, a home for science. And the first thing they started building within that new building was a theatre. Because for them, it was unthinkable that you couldn't really do science even at that point. Even it wasn't a professional activity. What you were doing was natural philosophy. Mm-hmm. And those natural philosophers were saying, what we need is a theatre, because this is what we want this place to be. It's about communication with public audiences, including audiences who wouldn't have been able to access science through other institutions at that time. It was quite a kind of closed off activity. And building a theatre before you've even started building your laboratory, it says something about the ethos of the organisation. And one of the things that's very special about the building is that we've been doing the same kinds of activities in the same building, on the same spot, for 226 years now. And there's still as much of a demand as there ever was to come and meet scientists and find out what they're working on. And the science has changed unbelievably. It's almost unrecognizable. But the act of communicating with scientists as a public audience has not changed. And so for some of the people who come through that front door of the Royal Institution, it's not a science centre, it's not a research institution, it's a museum. because we've got all these amazing objects and stories from the people who've worked at the Royal Institution as researchers and over the 226 years. People like, especially, let's say, Humphrey Davy, who discovered 10 different elements while he was working at the Royal Institution in between exploding things. He was a big fan of that. People like Michael Faraday, who have revolutionized the modern world. His understanding of electromagnetism has absolutely paved the way for the world that we live in today. And his laboratory is still in the building. You can come and see it. You can see the tables he worked on. You can see the equipment he used. You can see these ridiculously gigantic batteries that he had to use in order to generate his electromagnetic fields. You can see the solutions that he made up. Some of, they're still there in the glass vials. And I think for people who are really, really interested in the history of the modern world and how we got to this place that we're in now, being able to come and look at those objects laid out in the way they would have been laid out in the 1800s, in the same space. They haven't moved. I think we've put them somewhere safe during World War II. But apart from that, they've just been in that building this whole time. And we've got these lovely panels up on the wall talking about the research. We've got some videos and we've got some explanations. So I think that the museum exhibitions, mostly in the lower ground floor, but across in all parts of the building, really try and tell the story so that people feel part of that whole story, because that's what it has always been. The stories have come from the people who've visited, lived, worked in the building. And so if you visit the building, you're part of the same story. You're part of that really rich kind of thread that runs back to 1799.
Yeah, what an incredible space to be the custodian of, essentially, as I guess you are now. Safeguarding it, keeping it going for the current generations, but also safeguarding it for the future generations. And one thing that I think a lot of people, when they think of the Royal Institution, they will think of the Christmas lectures. It's almost inevitable. That's one of the things that comes to mind. And when this episode comes out, you're going to be deep in Christmas lecture season, aren't you?
Yeah, we are definitely deep in Christmas lectures planning, and it's a wonderful project to be part of. And this year is particularly special. Every year is special because every lecturer and topic is a bit different. You really get under the skin of a particular topic and how the lecturer sees that topic and what they're passionate about, and what they want to pass on to the next generation. The Christmas lectures were started by Michael Faraday for what he called a juvenile audience. And we don't really use that term anymore. We tend to talk about teenagers, 12 to 17-year-olds and their families. And so I think for the lecturer, it's an amazing opportunity to say what they want to say about their subject. It doesn't matter about the curriculum. It just matters what they want to say, what they want to pass on, as it were, to the next generation. So it's a real joy. But this year is especially special because it is 200 years since the Christmas lectures were founded. Yeah. Michael Faraday had a very busy 1825, Sarah, because he started the Christmas lectures, and he also started a programme of Friday evening discourses, which were announcement lectures. So when people have made a great discovery, they discovered the electron, or they discovered how to record sound and play it back, or they discovered how to take photographs, or whatever it was, they would announce this to a public audience using an invited discourse. And we still run that programme today. So that's two of Michael Faraday's programmes that are still running 200 years later, which is really exciting. And he also, in addition to doing that, he just casually discovered benzene. So
just all in a day's work.
Very industrious. He did work really hard, actually. He was very hardworking, and also brilliant. So that combination is great. But he cared as much about the communication as about the discovery. So, and that's true of a lot of the researchers who have worked with us over the years, both the ones that have lived and worked in the building, but also the ones who come to us for things like the Christmas lectures. The communication part of it is absolutely key to what they want to achieve in their lives, and the Christmas lectures helps us do that. Now, we keep all the content top secret, right? So that
are you allowed to say, do you know who the speaker is?
I can tell you who the speaker is. We are really delighted. So this year we are working with Maggie Adarin-Pocock, who is a space scientist. Yeah. And you might know her from Sky at Night. She does loads of work of school visits as well. Yes. So lots of young people have seen her talk, and she's totally inspirational. And she's an absolute joy to work with because she's as excited as we are, which is great. So it's the 200th birthday of the Christmas lectures this year. We're going to be talking about space science, and we want to talk a little bit about, I say we, Maggie, we'll have lots of guest lecturers as well. So we try and invite people who are working on particular projects that'll be quite exciting to come in if we want to cover that project or that technology or that invention, we might see if we can invite them in to tell us themselves. So we have quite a lot of guest lecturers, and that's a nice way for us to showcase a wide range of science and technology careers, which I think is particularly important for that age group, teenagers and their families. It's really helpful to say, well, maybe you want to do some A-levels and do a degree and do a PhD, that's fun. But there are lots and lots of other careers as well where you don't follow that route, and you don't need to be top of your class in a subject and all of this kind of thing. So, and I think we want to particularly focus on space technology. So now I can't spill any secrets because I'll be in so much trouble, Sarah. But you'll have to wait until the end of December to watch the lectures. But we want to make sure that we don't say, oh, astronomy, well, we know all this cool stuff. This is how the universe is. Isn't that nice? We want to say a little bit, Maggie wants to say a bit about how do we know that? How do we come to understand the universe the way it is? What's the technology that enabled us to see that? Because one of the things that I've noticed about astronomy is that the projects are big now. If you want to build a new telescope, it's probably going to take 20 years and then another 20 years for a mission to get it to where it needs to be to do its job. So you're creating equipment for the next generation of astronomers. To use, and you're using the ones that you worked on, maybe the instruments you worked on at the very beginning of your career. And Maggie has worked on some amazing kind of missions. She's worked on James Webb Space Telescope. So I am hoping we might be able to cover that. There's a lot of scripting going on right now.
I bet there is.
Yeah. But we'd like to showcase some of the kind of cutting edge of where the mission planning is going and what the future of that will be. Because I hope that some of the young people or others who watch these programs on the BBC, on BBC4, will say, oh, there's a place for me in that industry, in that sector. That could be the thing I want to do, because we just love it when that happens, when we get a Christmas lecturer who themselves watched the Christmas lectures back in the day and found them really inspiring. So I'm hopeful about that. But it's who knows what's going to make it in, Sarah, because it's all a bit of a flurry at the moment. The other thing we're doing is we're testing out lots of demos. You do loads of demos in the Christmas lectures as part of the kind of USP, and so there's a lot of odd bangs going on in the back room, frankly, so we'll see what happens.
But like you say, I'm sure that Michael Faraday and the previous inhabitants of the building would be delighted to know that sort of thing is still going on. We look forward to seeing and hearing more about that as it all becomes public knowledge later in December. So bringing it back then to you, how did you get into doing this kind of work? What's been your career journey? Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, I was really, really lucky. That's the first thing to say, in that I knew very early, I think, that I really loved science. I didn't want to be a scientist. And I didn't know what the rest of that sentence was, but I was very sure about that sentence from quite early on, that a kind of career in scientific research would have been, you have to be really focused on one topic for a long time, and I'm a bit too flighty for that. And so I knew I was looking for something, and I went to university and I did a degree in science, which I really enjoyed. And then I went to work for a pharmaceutical company for a couple of years, which I didn't enjoy quite so much, but it did. Some of the skills that gave me have been incredibly useful. And then a friend got in touch and said, oh, I've seen this course at Imperial College London called Science Communication. And my friend said, I think it's got your name on it. And I was like, yes, it's got my name on it. And I was very lucky. And I applied to do that master's course, taught masters. And
that must have been one of the first cohorts of that.
Yes. Without wishing to.
Sorry if I've given away.
We are talking about the late 90s, It was an era. And so it was one of the first cohorts of that course, which is still running. And a couple of months ago, actually, I went to give a talk to the new intake in that course, which just feels like the most incredible privilege, actually, because I can tell all these amazing, talented science communicators who are going to revolutionize our sector. I'm like, oh, this course changed my life. And it really did. And they look at me like, oh... because you're quite nervous when you start something like that, aren't you? But it was an amazing course, and it really opened my eyes to to what science communication is and how you can think about it, and the different kinds of careers that could come under the umbrella of science communication. And during that course, I started volunteering with a charity called Science Line. So this was a helpline for people with science questions. and which probably wouldn't really now because
I suppose you've got Google. It's like this is like prototype. Yeah.
Yeah, this was before Google, right?
Yeah.
The late 90s, there's no Google, there's definitely no ChatGPT, right?
Yeah.
People still made phone calls and they would call up and they would say, why is the sky blue? Or how do we know how big the universe is? Or what are the tides? What are they? Or why
there's something so wholesome about that.
It was very wholesome. Some of the questions were bonkers, but the thing that I started to find really interesting was like, how have you come to have this question? What's prompted you to be so interested, so curious to find a phone number and phone somebody and have a conversation about it? And I really enjoyed that experience. And we developed some family workshops and we took them based on the questions that people had asked. And we took them out on the road and we went to kind of town centres and shopping centres and places where people were anyway and did these kind of shows. And I can see a strong thread. I've done lots of other sort of jobs in the interim, but I can see a direct thread between listening to those questions and having those conversations, doing those shows, and then the kind of job that I do now, which is about recognising that some people are interested in science and they're not scientists. Maybe they haven't got they might not have professional qualifications or professional membership or a job in science, but they are interested in science as a cultural activity and they want to participate, and let's find ways for them to do that. And at the Royal Institution, we have this range of ways that people can be connected to science and feel involved and meet scientists and do all those things. And the roles I had in between taught me lots of other interesting things. So I worked for a while in a government, the Forensic Science Service, which is now closed, but was part of the civil servants. So that was a really interesting exercise in working very closely with research scientists and trying to support them. I worked for a funding body for a while, Sarah, which made me feel extremely popular.
I bet it did. Everybody's best friend.
I was, it was a shock when I stepped out of that job and realised it wasn't me. It was my funding pot that was popular. But that was great in terms of meeting loads of people who had great ideas and were really excited about the future. And sometimes I think about that era because sometimes you can feel despondent about the world. Very easy at the moment.
Yeah.
And actually, the things that change the world come from people. They come from the ideas and the interactions that people have. And I loved that kind of energy, that optimism that came from that kind of period. And then I spent a long time, longer than I ever would have thought possible, because I was having so much fun, Sarah, at the British Science Association, which does loads of great science engagement work, particularly with audiences who wouldn't step forward if you said the word science. So particularly trying to find ways to help more people feel empowered to participate in science, even if it's not what they would have thought of as their thing.
Yeah, and it was when you were at the British Science Association that you moved more from doing, just because I know this just because that's where I know you from the kind of doing the science communication more into the management, the leadership roles, wasn't it?
Yeah. That's right. And that's often, I think, an inflection point for people in a science communication career is, do you love the thing that you're doing? Because often science communication people got into it because they just love doing it, like talking about science and calling it a job. And if you want to get promoted and get more senior roles, you end up doing less of that stuff that is what you really loved in the first place. And there's a real inflection point for a lot of people. And sometimes people take one route and then decide it was the wrong one and then go back to the other path or whatever. Sometimes it's not a binary choice. Sometimes you do. We have careers are long, right? You can spend 10 years following one route and then do 10 years on the other. So there's no right or wrong answer, even for an individual. But I found that I did really enjoy managing teams, managing projects, thinking about the fit between what's a project or a program doing and what's the wider environment and what does that wider context need, and getting very involved in. When we worked together, Sarah, we were thinking a lot, weren't we, about extracurricular opportunities for young people based around science, technology and engineering, and about how to properly organise that so that teachers and young people can make the most of it. And I found I quite enjoyed that sort of thinking about that rather than just doing the delivery. But I do miss a bit of the delivery.
It sounds like you get into the theatre and get your hands dirty a little bit. So, you still got a little... That side of things is still there. Yeah,
I do. I get a bit of that. And sometimes I come up with ideas first. Oh, we could do this. And my colleagues, bless them, they're like, yeah. And then I go, it's okay. We'll do your ideas. Your ideas are better. I just can't help it. I can't resist.
Oh, so it's interesting you said there that you've done a talk recently to young people who are, or maybe not young people, actually, maybe older people, but who've gone to do that Masters in Science Communication. And I think certainly the world of science communication, both you and I came into it about the same time, is very different now, and careers opportunities and things like that. What do you think are either the biggest challenges you faced or the sort of challenges that you think people are facing now?
I think in terms of challenges for science communication, one of the biggest ones is the pace of change in the digital world. So the ways in which digital platforms and digital audiences are co-evolving very rapidly. So splintering of different platforms. Like we all learned how to use Twitter and now it's unusable. Or a lot of audiences on TikTok are only on TikTok. So if you're not on TikTok, there's huge swathes of the population you're just never reaching. And this retreat from platforms that most people shared into smaller groups, maybe focused around newsletters or maybe focused around, I don't know, game streaming platforms. The online world is really splintering into smaller and smaller groups, and that makes it much harder to find audiences and to build relationships with them. And I think that's a real challenge, that if you're a science communicator now, you need to be across all of that. Ideally, with experience of making content on different platforms to different audiences. I think when I was thinking about science communication back in the late 90s, I was like, maybe I'll do museums, or I could be a journalist, or I could do extracurricular work with young people. And there was these pathways, you just chose one and you went down it. And now that's much less common. It's much more common to be across a wide range of formats and with experience of lots of different audiences. And I think that's, in terms of career planning, that's harder because you need to try and pick up all these different skills at the same time in different ways. So I think the career paths are less clear-cut, actually, although there's more of them in a way, and they're more blurred. And I think in terms of the world that we are in, the decline in trust in institutions, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing, blind trust in institutions is not where I would like us to be. But the loss of trust in institutions in general and the way that's affecting science and the way that science is becoming, particularly at the moment, and particularly in the US, becoming politicized, I think is going to be a huge challenge for all of us who care about science and care about getting the best out of science for the future of humanity, if that's not too grandiose. But all of us who care about that are going to have to grapple with this challenge. I have no idea how we're going to do that.
No, I often hear people saying we need science communicators more than ever. And I think on the one hand, that's true. But also, as you say, tackling the misinformation, the disinformation, as you say, the splintering, and how you actually connect with the people who need to hear that information. And I think the mistrust in organizations means that people are often less inclined to listen, and all of that just presents huge challenges for not just, there's the factual element of it is one side of things, but also, as you say, just the joy of it. That's something that's really come through in how you're talking, is these things. How do you make it fun rather than just, I think this and what you think is wrong? So, yeah. And I often think that's the secret to how you open the door, isn't it? To start having these conversations.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I think one of the things I think I've noticed in the UK sector, at least, is that we talk less about science communication than we used to. And we talk a bit more about public engagement. With science or public engagement with research. And that's partly, I think, because of the rise of the discipline and the practice in the university sector, which I think is a good thing, just to be clear. I think having public engagement teams in universities is great. Let's do that. I don't want to take anything away from that. But I think that approach, which is often about, so it might be about work with local audiences, or it might be working with particular research topics or citizen science groups, or being a good civic citizen as a university. So being a good employer, being a good neighbour, being a place that students want to apply to, so like recruitment agenda. The agendas that are very real and very important in universities, public engagement with research work has to tie into those agendas, completely right. Often they are about the research sector and how that's leading it, or about a local, regional kind of place-based agenda. And that's all great. But I think science communication has a slightly different set of agendas and topics, drivers, and they have been just been on the wane, I think, with this rise in public engagement and research. And I think we might be losing out, particularly when it comes to doing science communication for awe and wonder and joy in our audiences. The kind of, as opposed to doing science communication because you want people to have an informed idea, to be an informed citizen, to make informed decisions about their everyday life. That's really important motivation for science communication. Absolutely. Sometimes we are thinking about decision making at a societal level. That's a really important motivation for science communication, completely. Sometimes we want a broader and more diverse group of young people to consider science careers. That's a really good motivation. They're all really good motivations. Awe and wonder and joy, I think, is a motivation all by itself, with just as much value and importance as all the other motivations, but I think it gets a bit downgraded because it sounds a bit fluffy. Oh, you just want to make a great TV program, like, oh, we're trying to do vaccinations over here.
Yeah, or also you can't measure it. I think that's where some of these things get. Could you tell us your level of awe on a scale of 1 to 10, please, so that we can write a report and justify our existence? And as you say, I think a lot of the research, engagement and impact agenda has done a lot to make research better, make universities, like you say, accountable to the local communities and things like that. So I think that's all been good. But I do think, as one of my previous guests, Orla Kelly, said, you don't make a pig fat by weighing it. And we just spend so much time measuring and quantifying and justifying that I think we do lose that sense of awe and wonder. Yeah.
I think often the awe and wonder is the bedrock from which trust is developed. Like when people watch David Attenborough on the TV, they're watching for the emotional impact.
Yeah.
Some people are memorizing wildebeest facts, maybe, but it's the emotion. Great. It's not about education. It's not about learning per se. It's about sharing with Attenborough the awe and wonder of the natural world. And that is a really human experience. And you get that with you're lying on top of a hill in the middle of the night with an astronomer, looking up at the sky, learning about what's out there. There are lots of ways of generating these experiences of awe and wonder. And I think that is what brings us together as human beings who participate in science. And that's what positions science as a shared endeavour, I think, that we're all engaged with. And that is a great basis from which to support people to make informed decisions on vaccination, or encourage young people to study science for longer, or engage in a debate about a wind farm, where it's going to go, or whatever it is. But without those shared human experiences, that kind of bedrock for building trust, I think all of the other stuff is much harder.
Yeah.
So I think that awe and wonder is as important as all of the other motivations and doesn't always get as much of the kind of attention or resource.
Yes. Yeah. Well, a little bit more of that would be good. Well, I do like to ask my guests, I feel like almost like I've led you here. So you're very welcome to choose something different if you want to. But I like to invite my guests to wave a magic wand and change something about the world that they work in. So it doesn't have to relate to what we've just said, but it can if you want. But yeah, what would you do with your magic wand?
I think the challenges that feel very spiky to me at the moment are around resource, money, mostly money, sometimes time, but mostly money, resource and equity. So I know you only said one thing, but I'm going to change two things. I would like a more equitable society, world, and I would like more resource. I think one of the reasons why the world feels a bit like a despondent place at the moment is that there just doesn't seem to be enough resource, time or money around to do all the things that are important. And I don't know how we got to that place. There isn't less time and there isn't objectively less money, really. But
why does it feel that way? I don't know. I think partly the pace of life has really sped up, hasn't it? So that means there's almost like this expectation of you should be able to do more. It's always like more, do more, more people, more. And it also, because I think now we've got that awareness of where we sit in a global pool, a global situation, that you're always aware that you could be doing more. It just never quite, anything never quite feels like enough. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds a very good use of the magic wand. So
thank you for letting me borrow it, Sarah. I'm looking forward to the future now.
Oh, thank you so much, Catherine, for coming along and sharing your story. Yeah, this is one of those things I feel like I could talk to you about the nuance of science communication for hours, but the listeners might not be quite so keen on listening to that. And if people want to find out more about you or the work they do, where is a good place to direct them?
So, well, I am very happy to talk about science communication with everybody because it's my passion. And I'm very happy to talk about the Royal Institution with everyone as well. There's lots of info on the website, rigb.org, and you can find me either through the website or on LinkedIn.
Yes, you're very active on LinkedIn, aren't you? Yeah, well, I'll get those links and put them in the show notes. So thank you so much. It has been lovely to catch up, and thanks for giving so much of your time. And clearly, there's a lot going on in your working life.
Been great talking to you, Sarah. Thanks so much for the invitation.
Thanks for listening to Research Adjacent. If you're listening in a podcast app, please check you're subscribed and then use the links in the episode description to find full show notes and to follow the podcast on LinkedIn or Instagram. You can also find all the links and other episodes at www.researchadjacent.com. Research Adjacent is presented and produced by Sarah McCluskey, and the theme music is by Lemon Music Studios on Pixabay. And you, yes you, get a big gold star for listening right to the end. See you next time.